Tuhan ialah membaca, menuntut ilmu di seluruh budaya.
Inilah teladan sepanjang masa, gayakan hidup dengan membaca. Apalah nama andai tanpa ilmu, apalah mahkota permatanya palsu. Tanpa membaca cacatlah minda, tanpa ilmu kemanalah kita. Jika ilmu pernah di dada, bila bergaya dengan membaca.
Dunia sempit menjadi luas, tempat kejayaan tiada terbatas. Negara yang kecil, tinggi martabat, kerana ilmu negara berdaulat.
Mari kawan, kita membaca. Mari silakan timba ilmu dengan membaca. Inilah perjuangan, sambutlah seruan.
Jadikan
membaca gaya wawasan. Everybody take a book and read to gain knowledge. Everyone has to read. Let's reach out, open up your mind.
let's make reading
A lifestyle of wawasan. Mari kawan, kita membaca. Mari silakan timba ilmu dengan membaca. Inilah perjuangan, sambutlah seruan.
jadikan
Membaca gaya wawasan. Everybody take a book and read to gain knowledge. Everyone has to read. Let's reach out, open up your mind.
let's make reading
A lifestyle of wawasan. Mari kawan, kita membaca. Mari silakan timba ilmu dengan membaca. Inilah perjuangan, sambutlah seruan.
jadikan
Membaca gaya wawasan.
Bộ pandai-pandai halang buku-buku, bacalah pandai-pandai buku-buku berbaca ilmu. Santang lemak manis, santang pelaku muda, jangan anak menangis, kalau anak suruh membaca.
Lifestyle of wawasan. Mari kawan, kita membaca. Mari silakan timba ilmu dengan membaca. Inilah perjuangan, sambutlah seruan.
jadikan
Membaca gaya wawasan. Everybody take a book and kebanggaan semua, menyuluh hidup jaya. Berbagai maklumat terkumpul sedia, berkhidmat setia, berbakti pada rakyat Malaysia dan menetap terbina. Perpustakaan negara Malaysia, penggerak budaya membaca. Berbagai hasanah yang ada, pusaka warisan bangsa. Rakyat yang berilmu akan terus maju, gunakan sumber ilmu. Bersama kita membina wawasan jadi nyata. Bagai api obor memberi cahaya, perpustakaan kita menjadi kebanggaan semua, menyuluh hidup jaya. Berbagai maklumat terlihat setia, berbakti pada rakyat Malaysia dan menetap terbina. Perpustakaan negara Malaysia, penggerak budaya membaca. Berbagai hasanah yang ada, pusaka warisan bangsa. Rakyat yang berilmu akan terus maju, gunakan sumber ilmu. Bersama kita membina wawasan jadi nyata. Wawasan jadi nyata.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Now we will continue our afternoon session with the 7th storytelling session entitled The Sparrow with a Thorn in His Claw by Madam Selin Akoglu from Turkey. Before we start, let me introduce our speaker. Madam Selin Akoglu is a professional storyteller who was born in 1980 in Istanbul. Graduated from Boğaziçi University Chemistry Department. She has married, mother of 2 sons, 6 and 11 years old, a traveler who follows tales, stories and poetry storyteller. In essence, she follows Waldorf pedagogy and Jungian psychology in storytelling. She has received various training both at home and abroad. She has been telling folktales to both children and adults more than 2 years. She organized evenings to analyze fairy tale for adults. She especially reads on the psychology of fairy tales and plans to carry these studies to the academic field. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Madam Selin Akoglu.
Hello from Turkey. My name is Selin. I am a storyteller, and today I will tell you a story from Anatolia. Once upon a time, while I was swinging the cradle of my grandma, there was a beautiful forest in the distant lands. The animals in this forest lived happily. The foxes, the bears, the rabbits, the little wet snails, the sparrows. One day, a little sparrow's groan was heard among the gently plashing sound of the river. The tiny sparrow had a thorn in his claw, and it was hurting. He tried to remove it, but no matter how hard he tried, the thorn never came out. So he desperately began to fly around and look for help. By the way, there was a village just next to that forest, and there was a sweet apple-cheeked granny living in that village. She was wearing a white headscarf. In Anatolia, women generally wear some things like that. And the granny was kneading dough to bake it in the oven and to cook delicious breads. And she was not alone. All the other women from the village were helping her. So they were all together, kneading dough and singing songs. Hey, 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 yamo, yamo, hey, mo, hey, yamo, hey, yamo, li, hey, yamo. Let's sing together. Hey, 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 yamo, yamo, hey, mo, hey, yamo, hey, yamo, li, hey, yamo. Hey, 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 yamo, yamo, hey, mo, hey, yamo, hey, yamo, li, hey, yamo. Hey, 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 yamo, yamo, hey, mo, hey, yamo, hey, yamo, li, hey, yamo. It was smelling delicious. It was fantastic. The smell of the bread was walking in the air and reached the nose of our little sparrow. He was flying around and took the smell. So he followed the smell, followed, and finally found the granny. He gently landed just next to the granny and said, "Granny, Granny, I had a thorn in my claw. Could you remove it, please?" The granny took the little sparrow in her palm and removed the thorn gently. At that moment, The little sparrow had a deep breath. "Oh, thank you very much," and said, "Granny, could you please keep this thorn with you for me? I have some works to do now. I will go, but I will come back. When I come back, I will need this thorn. Please do not throw it away. If you throw it away, I will take one of your breads." The granny smiled and, "Oh, my dear, of course I will keep this thorn for you. I promise." And at that moment, our little sparrow flew away. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, 3 days passed, but the sparrow didn't come back. 4 days passed, 5 days passed, 6 days passed, but the sparrow didn't come back. 1 week passed, 2 weeks passed, 3 weeks passed, but the little sparrow didn't come back. Finally, the granny took the thorn and thought, I will burn this useless thorn. And she put the thorn into the fire. Poof! At that second, the little thorn turned to ashes. And at that second, our little sparrow appeared and landed just next to the granny. "Granny, Granny, could you please give my thorn back?" "Oh, my dear, I didn't know that it was so important for you. I had just burned it." At that moment, the sparrow was so angry because the promise was not kept. So, without saying any no more words, he took one of her breads with his mouth and flew away and disappeared in the air. He flew in the air. He passed by the mountains, passed by the rivers, passed by the forests, and finally he was hungry. He looked down and saw a meadow. There were sheep and lambs feeding in that meadow, and there was a shepherd sitting just in the shadow of a big tree. Our little sparrow gently landed just next to the shepherd and put the bread on the ground and said, the shepherd, I have this bread for 2 of us. We will eat it together. But now I have some works to do. I will go now, but come back later. When I come back, if I cannot find the bread, then I will take one of your well-fed sheep. The shepherd said, Oh, dear sparrow, of course I will keep your bread with me and I will wait for you, I promise. And at that moment, our little sparrow flew away. 1 hour passed, 2 hours passed, 3 hours passed, but the sparrow didn't come back. 4 hours passed, 5 hours passed, 6 hours passed, but the sparrow didn't come back. The shepherd was so hungry. he had some milk from his sheep and chopped a piece of bread, dipped into the milk, and eat it with pleasure. It was so delicious. So he had one more piece of bread, dipped into the milk, and ate it. He finished all the bread. At that moment, guess who came? Yes, our little sparrow gently landed just next to the shepherd and said, dear shepherd, could you please give my bread back?" But the shepherd said, "Oh, dear sparrow, I just had the bread." The sparrow was very angry because the promise was not kept. So, without saying any more words, the sparrow had one of the best sheep of the shepherd and flew away. He passed by the mountains, passed by the rivers, passed by the forests, and finally he was so tired. He looked down and saw a wooden house. He gently landed in front of the wooden house, put the sheep on the ground, and met the host of the wooden house. There were a wedding on that house. Yes, all the guests, bride, everyone was there. They were playing, singing songs. Our little sparrow told the host that, "Could you please keep my sheep with you? I have some works to do and I will go now, but later I will come back. When I come back, I will need this sheep. If you cannot give this sheep back to me, then I will take the bride." The host smiled and thought that, how a little sparrow could kidnap the bride from the wedding? This is insane. But said, "Oh, of course, little sparrow. I will keep your sheep. I promise." And at that moment, as you know, our little sparrow flew away. The host sacrificed the sheep and served to the guests. At that moment, the sparrow came back and asked, "Could you please give my sheep back?" The host said, "This is not possible because I served it to the guests." At that moment, the little sparrow was so angry because the promise was not kept. So he took the bride and flew away, disappeared in the air. They passed by the mountains, passed by the rivers, passed by the forests, and finally the little sparrow was thirsty. He looked down and saw a fountain. He gently landed just next to the fountain, put the bride gently on the ground, and began to drink water. At that second, he heard a sound. It was a song. The drummer playing his drum and singing a very emotional song. He looked at the drummer and said, the drummer, could you please give your drum to me? If you give your drum to me, then I will give you the bride. And at that moment, it was like a miracle, because she was the woman that the drummer fallen in love. Yes, they were lovers in the past, but the father of the woman didn't let them to marry because the drummer was a poor man. But finally, they were together. They married and lived happily ever after. And Arlo the sparrow, yes, he was also happy and had his new drum flying around and singing songs.
thank you to our speaker for the excellent session. The following storytelling session is entitled House of Sun and Moon and the tale by Madam Usha Venkatraman from India. Before we start, let me introduce our speaker. Madam Usha Venkatraman is an award-winning international performance storyteller, educationist and classical vocalist from Mumbai, India, who weaves magic with her words. Her puppetry skill make her tale fascinating. She has performed in India and abroad as a featured storyteller. She is the founder and creative director of Mumbai Storytellers Society, MSS, with over 24 years old, regaling young and old audience. She is well known and in demand for her unique style of infusing stories with music. She is a trained classical vocalist, puppeteer, and independent researcher. Her passion include adapting traditional Indian stories and multicultural folktale to celebrate and keep alive their ancient wisdom for future generation and using stories to spread awareness. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Madam Usha Venkatraman.
Hello, Namaste from Mumbai, India. I'm Usha Venkatraman and I'm very happy to be part of the Malaysia International Storytelling Festival 2021. The story that I'm about to tell you is not a story of a king or a queen, gods or demons. Rather, it is the story of water. Now, this story is a Nigerian folk tale retold by an Indian author, Amrita Patil. It's a favorite story of mine because it has so many elements of science in it and all about our everyday life. I hope you enjoy listening to this story as much as I'm going to enjoy telling you the story. The House of the Sun and the Moon. Oh, they were a beautiful couple. Perfect match, a match made in heaven. I'm talking about the sun and the moon. Wherever they stood, they made the world beautiful, illuminated everything. One day, sun and the moon decided to build a house. Well, it took a long time and a lot of place. But they did complete it. In fact, it took the entire sky, entire space of the universe. And it was bigger than the biggest and more roomier than heaven itself. And they filled it with the most delightful artifacts and things. Sun and the moon also created trees and mountains at a distance so that when they looked out of their window, they had an interesting view. As for the clouds, oh, they danced about in the garden like technicolored sheep, all the flock of clouds. As for the light, oh, let me describe the light. During the day, the room was filled with soothing blue, the walls of the house. Sometimes dazzling gold, and in the night, purple pink. But night time was the best. In the night, the entire ceiling was draped in trillions of twinkling, dazzling, heavy stars. Sun and the moon stood in their garden and admired their house that they had created. It was spectacular indeed. And they both clapped their hands with glee, turned to each other and said, "Yes, what we need is a party. We need to invite all our friends." And Sun and the Moon had many friends, but their best friend was Water and her family. So Sun and the Moon sat down and designed an invitation, a handwritten invite, was sent to all their friends. Not a pachyderm or beetle was left. Every bug and seed got a separate invite. Oh, it was a spectacular party. What a grand fete it was. There was a spectacular sound, light, and magic show. Sumptuous food was cooked, sweets and savories were placed on every table. Table was decorated with flowers, and there was a jar of honey at every table. Indeed, a grand party. You could smell wet earth and freshly baked cake in the oven. And somebody gifted the moon a chandelier of asteroids. The wind also came by, and along with the wind, the silk cotton pods burst open in time to hitch a ride up with the wind. Oh, the satellites and the planets carefully orbited around the earth, and the meteors showered overhead. A flock of geese made clever sorties up in the sky, and the snowflakes that were descending made a slight detour so that they could watch this spectacular show. As for the sunflowers, oh, they couldn't attend the party, you see, my friends, because they were grounded. So they craned their necks up to see this spectacular show. Indeed, a wonderful party. Everyone exclaimed in delight, and everyone got a shiny, sparkling return gift too. Sun and the moon, after everyone had left, put away the last star and rested the last cloud to sleep. And they stood in the garden and looked at the aftermath of the party. You know, generally we tend to do some post-mortem, and that's what Sun and the Moon did. They knew the throngs of people had exclaimed about this party. They had gone, ooh, ah, marvelous, wonderful, superb. What delicious food, spectacular sound, light, and magic show. All these comments were ringing in their ears. But, there was a but. All that the sun and the moon could think about was their friend Water, who had not come for their party. She was the only friend who had not come for their party. Moon turned to the sun and said in a complaining tone, "Why do you think Water did not come? You know, we have visited her house many times. In fact, Sun, I help her with her waves every day. Why didn't she come? Did she not want us to be happy?" Now, wait a minute, said the sun. He didn't want Moon getting upset. It didn't bode well when both of them grew sulky. And the Moon, when she went into her sulks, she went into a sulky crescent and disappeared for days. And this drove Sun crazy with despair. He didn't want her getting sulky, so he tried to comfort her. But he too felt actually sad and quite insulted by Water, who had not turned up for their party. He was hurt. And he decided to investigate as to why the Water had not come for the party the next day. Next day, in the afternoon, when the sun was at his zenith up in the sky, Sun looked down at Water and cleared his throat. "Hey, you!" he called out, and Water looked up at the sun shyly. and said, I believe you had a wonderful party yesterday. Ha! Snorted the sun. As if you noticed. You were not there. There was a no-show from you. And Water continued, I thought you wouldn't have noticed with so many other people. Of course we notice when so-called friends like you don't turn up for our party, said the sun. Now Water knew that Sun was disappointed, and she continued, you see, Sun, I have a large family. I can't leave them unattended. I have a huge responsibility. Responsibility? Did I hear you say responsibility? Friends, did you hear Water say responsibilities? What responsibilities? You are a mere liquid. Wait, you're just a puddle, an overgrown puddle, and you talk about responsibilities? Watch it. In a matter of seconds or minutes, I can evaporate you to just salt and sand, said the sun, and he laughed cruelly and loudly. And he hurt Water. She felt ashamed and very small. But she knew that the sun was a good star at heart. And the sun continued his tirade. Responsibilities. I have responsibilities. You know, I run the entire solar system. Yet, I made time to build a house and even have a party and sent out handwritten invites to ingrates like you, said the sun, and he expostulated. In fact, there was a sun flare. He burst a gasket. Well, Water knew that Sun was her friend and he was not a bad star at heart. He meant well. And she replied in a measured tone, you see, Sun, just try and understand me. I have a large family. I couldn't leave them unattended. You see, we are a big family, my children and I. And you wouldn't have enough room to accommodate all of us. That's it. No sooner had Water finished saying this, the sun lost his temper. It was the last straw. Accommodate you? Water, the invitation was for your children as well. All of you were invited, and the house of the sun and the moon is so large, we could have accommodated you easily. Sun didn't like being belittled by a mere liquid. So he turned to Water and said, well, my fair weather friend, I'm sure you have a lot of responsibilities to attend to. I believe I have a sunset to attend to. And he was about to turn away when Water again called out, oh sun, you've mistaken me, my friend. Water was pacific by nature. She didn't want to upset the sun. So she turned to the sun once more and said, you see, sun, I'm large. I'm rather large. My family and I. You know, it would be inconvenient for you, and that's why we didn't come. Sun had reached his point of no return, and he said, my house is large enough. Why don't you come and see? And suddenly he seemed to lose his steam because he knew he had been a bully and he had hurt Water. He could see Water's face becoming small and sad. So he continued. He felt sheepish and he said, well, if you want to make amends, Water, why don't you come to our house tomorrow evening? Moon and I would love to host you and your children. Come tomorrow evening. Water relented. She sighed. She knew she couldn't win this argument with the sun. And she sighed deeply because she knew about the consequences. Sure, I'll be there, she said. And she set about gathering her family in her apron. She didn't want to leave her family unattended because they would parch and die. It was rather a complicated job, my friends. Holy moly! Her family was shy, slippery, and rather delicate. She scooped them all up in her blue-green trailing watery skirt and began the long voyage journey to the house of the sun and the moon. Along the way, she was joined by rivers, oceans, glaciers, seas, streams, brooks, ponds, lakes, puddles. Everybody joined this watery parade. Plankton and fish, porpoise, turtle, seaweeds and shrimps. Everyone joined, along with seals, crabs, sea lions, sea snakes, seaweed and mangroves, and a million other things that you wouldn't know them on a first name basis. Even I wouldn't know them on a first name basis. Everyone joined the watery parade all the way to the house of the sun and the moon. You know, it was their first outing ever. They had never been anywhere out, and everyone was excited except for Water. Water was rather anxious. Her three triple friends, the triple T, Typhoon, Tempest, and Tide, also decided to join in. And Water knew that when they were around, things got boisterous. Things were never simple when they were around. So began this long voyage to the house of the sun and the moon. Soon the watery parade reached the door of the house of the sun and the moon. There was a fever pitch of excitement. Everyone wanted to see what lay behind that door. What wonderful, spectacular things. Well, the whole sky was an upside-down bowl of water, with the last cloud drowning in it. As for the baleen whale, it ricocheted in the sky, and the fish skidded to a halt in the garden. And a gargantuan wave was building behind Water. And as she rang the bell, this wave gathered height almost like a tsunami wave, because all her family wanted to see what lay behind that door. And as Water rang the doorbell, knocked on the door, she could hear the silvery hostess voice of the moon. "Be right there. Hang on." And Water tried once more. She said, "Please, I understand if you do not open the door. I quite understand. We can just turn back and go home." And that's when the sun bellowed. His imperious voice rang out from the other side of the door. "Water, listen to me, my friend. Everyone, at least once in their lifetime, should visit the house of the sun and the moon." And with a flourish, he opened the door. And the rest, as they say, is history. Water gushed in fact, pulled the door off its hinges, and it was driven away in the flood of water. Waves Water came in from every crevice and corner. There was a whirlpool of water. So much of water everywhere. The house of the sun and the moon came tumbling down. The fish, they skidded to a halt in the carpet once again. As for the sea cow, it landed plonk in the middle of the dining table. And the moon, she escaped with the chandelier of asteroids. As for the sun, his dignity was dampened a bit, and he too escaped through the ceiling and decided to wait it out for the water to recede. It took a long time. Well, that was the day water decided to visit the house of the sun and the moon. Do you think sun and the moon were upset with water? There was a blight in their friendship? No, friends, not at all. What's some water in the grand scheme of things in the universe? Of course, sun and the moon did not mind. Water was their best friend. And they did build another spectacular house. You couldn't stop them from building another house. It was more beautiful than ever before. And they did decide to have a housewarming party. Everyone was invited. A handwritten invite was sent to all their friends. Every pachyderm bug, beetle, and seed got a separate invite. But this time, water stayed away. Yes, instead, water sent rainbows instead. As for the sun and the moon, they never underestimated the responsibility of water ever again. Thank you. Well, the second story that I'm about to tell you is a story which took place somewhere in the hillsides of the Blue Mountains in South India. There lived a farmhand, a young shepherd boy who worked for the farmer. His job was to take the cattle out to graze, sheep and cow. And he did that every day, and he would bring them back and pen them. And his job was also to count the sheep and the cows. Well, one day, after grazing on the mountainside, the meadows, the long green juicy grass, the shepherd boy herded his cattle and brought them back to pen. And he had to count the animals. And he counted, and there were 6 sheep missing. So after locking the gate, he went back to look out for the missing sheep. And he found them grazing far in the field, but there were only 5 sheep. So he brought them back, penned them, and went looking for the last sheep. He searched high and low, everywhere, all over the meadow, the hillside, but he didn't find the missing sheep. At last, somewhere near the pond that ran close to the hillside, he heard a bleating sound, and he knew it was the missing sheep. So he went towards the pond, and there, next to the pond, was a mud puddle. And in that mud puddle, the sheep was stuck. The sheep couldn't get out of the mud puddle. So the young boy reached out, bent over, and held the tail of the sheep, and he pulled and he pulled. Heave ho, heave ho. Nothing happened. He couldn't pull the sheep out of the mud puddle. So he took off his coat and muffler. It was quite cold in the hillside, children. It was, after all, in the month of September, October, autumn, and it was getting cold. So the shepherd boy rested his coat, took off his muffler, pulled his sleeves up, then leaned forward, reached out, and pulled the tail. Pull, pull, heave ho, heave ho. He fell back. Nothing happened. He couldn't pull the sheep out of the mud puddle. He decided to try one last time. He took a deep breath. And then he leaned forward, used all his strength, and pulled at the tail of the sheep. Pulled, pulled, pulled. Oh! The tail came in his hand. If the tail had been stronger, this tale, the story, would have been longer, my friends. Thank you. With that, I come to the end of my session. Hope you enjoyed listening to my stories as much as I enjoyed telling them. Thank you and namaste from Mumbai, India.
Thank you to our speaker for the excellent session. Now we will continue with the 9th storytelling session entitled The Wishing Folk and Picking Peas by Madam Margaret Reed MacDonald from United States. Before we start, let me introduce our speaker. Madam Margaret Reed MacDonald is an American storyteller, folklorist, and prolific author of children's books. She has published more than 65 books of stories and about storytelling, which have been translated into many languages. She has performed internationally as storyteller and is considered a master storyteller and the grand dame of storytelling. She has been a member of the board of the National Storytelling Association and president of Children Folklore section of the American Folklore Society. She attended Indiana University, receiving her Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology in 1962. She attended the University of Washington, receiving her Master of Library Science in 1964, and the University of Hawaii, receiving her Master of Education in Early Childhood Education in 1969. Then she returned to Indiana University to receive her PhD in folklore in 1979. She also has been a member of the American Library Association, Association for Library Service to Children, Children Literature Association, International Board of Book for Young People, Society of Children Book Writer and Illustrator, and Washington Library Association. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Madam Margaret Reed MacDonald.
Hi, I'm Margaret Reed MacDonald, and I'm here to tell you some stories today from Appalachia. It's an area toward the southern part of the United States. I was born and raised in southern Indiana, so these stories are from an area very near where I grew up. The first story is called The Wishing Foxes, and it's from Kentucky. That state is just right across the Ohio River from southern Indiana, where I grew up. The Wishing Foxes. There was a woman that had 2 daughters, Bess and Tess. Bess was a really good girl. She was kind to everyone she met. Tess, not so much. Tess was mean and unkind. One day the mother called Bess and said, "Bess, I want you to go down to the well at the end of the world and get some water. Here's the water bucket." So Bess took her bucket to get water and went down the road. She was happy, she was singing. Going to the well at the end of the world. Going to the well at the end of the world. Going to the well at the end of the world. It's a lovely, lovely day. She hadn't gone far when she heard a scary sound. It was a big old bear. Oh, Mr. Bear, said Bess, you seem to be in a bad mood today. Could I go past to get some water? That big bear was blocking her way. The bear said, huh? Why, girl, you just spoke kindly to me. No one ever speaks kindly to me. They always shoot guns and holler at me. Of course you may pass. And the bear stepped aside, and she went on down the road. She was still singing. Going to the well at the end of the world. Going to the well at the end of the world. Going to the well at the end of the world. It's a lovely, lovely day. Then she heard, oh, it was a big mountain lion. Oh, Mr. Mountain Lion, you appear to be in a bad mood today, said Bess. Would you let me go past so I can go down to the well to get some water? Girl, you just spoke kindly to me. No one ever speaks kindly to me. They always kick me with their boots and shoot guns at me. You can pass. And she went on down, going to the well at the end of the world, going to the well at the end of the world, going to the well at the end of the world. It's a lovely, lovely day. Hadn't gone far when she heard, it was a big old wild boar, big old pig. She said, oh, Mr. Boar, you appear to be in a bad mood today, but would you let me go by? I need to go to the well to get some water. The big old wild boar said, girl, you just spoke kindly to me. No one ever speaks kindly to me. They always kick me with their boots and call me a stinky old thing. You go right on by. And she went on, going to the well at the end of the world, going to the well at the end of the world, going to the well at the end of the world. It's a lovely, lovely day. And there was the well at the end of the world, and there were 3 little foxes sleeping there. When they heard the girl coming, they woke up. A girl, here comes a girl. She said, what sweet little foxes. The first little fox said, pick me up and wash my face and lay me down right easy. What a sweet little fox, she said. She picked up the little fox. She washed its face. She laid it down right easy. The second little fox said, pick me up and wash my face and lay me down right easy too. She picked it up, washed its face, laid it down right easy. The third little fox said, pick me up, wash my face, lay me down right easy. She picked up the third little fox, washed its face, and laid it down right easy. The 3 little foxes said, let's make wishes for this kind, kind girl. And the first fox said, I wish that whenever she opens her mouth to talk, gold coins fall out of her mouth. The second little fox said, I wish that whenever she sneezes, diamonds come out of her nose. The third little fox said, I wish that when she washes her face, she just gets prettier and prettier and prettier. So Bess went home with her bucket of water. She said, Mama, I got that. And when she opened her mouth, gold coins fell out on the floor. And then she sneezed, achoo, and diamonds came out of her nose. And when she washed her face, she just got prettier and prettier and prettier. Well, her mama said, Tess, you go down and get some presents from those foxes. So Tess went out with the bucket, but she was not in a good mood. She was singing, going to the well at the end of the world, going to the well at the end of the world, going to the well at the end of the world, and you better get out of my way. Pretty soon, there was that big old bear coming at her, blocking the road. She said, "Oh, you old stinky bear, get out of here, get out of here." She hit it with her bucket, hit it with her boots, and the bear jumped at her, and she had to run to get away. I hadn't gone forward. It was that mountain lion. "Oh, you mean old mountain lion, get out of here, get out of here." She hit it with her bucket, hit it with her boots, and had to run to get away from it too. And then, what'd she hear next? It was the wild boar. "Hey, you stinky old pig, get out of here." And she kicked it and hit it, and she had to run to get away from it too. And she got on down there to the well at the end of the world. There was the three little foxes. They said, "A girl, a girl, here comes another girl." And the first little fox said, "Pick me up and wash my face and lay me down right easy. Here's where I get my presents," she said. And she snatched up that little fox, sloshed water in his face, and slammed it on the ground. Eek! The second little fox said, "Pick me up and wash my face and lay me down right easy." She snatched up that fox, sloshed water in his face, and slammed it on the ground. Eek! The third little fox said, "Pick me up, wash my face, lay me down right easy, please." She snatched it up, sloshed water in its face, and slammed it on the ground. Eek! Those three little foxes said, "Let's make wishes for this unkind girl." And the first little fox said, "I wish that when she opens her mouth to talk, frogs hop out of her mouth." The second fox said, "I wish that when she sneezes, corn come out of her nose." And the third fox said, "I wish that when she washes her face, she just gets uglier and uglier and uglier." So Tess went home with her bucket of water and said, "Mama, I got the..." And when she opened her mouth, frogs hopped out on the floor. And she sneezed, "Achoo!" And corn kernels came out of her nose. And when she washed her face, she got uglier and uglier and uglier. So after that, Bess went to get the water, and Tess stayed home until she learned how to treat people right. After all, you know, if you're kind to people, kindness comes right back to you. And that's the story from Kentucky about the wishing boxes. Kitty Harville made the pictures, and she cut paper to make them, to make those little foxes. That's all cut out of paper and then pasted together. I'll show you what she made the picture of the bear look like. Look at that bear. She found some nubbly paper to use to cut the bear out of. And I'll show you what well, there's the mountain lion. And let me show you the wild boar. Look at that wild boar. I like it later in the book when she has the wild boar actually chasing the girl. Look at that picture. Oh, that's chasing the bad girl, the unkind sister. Yeah. And then I have a picture of the little foxes in here. Let's see what the foxes. Oh, here's the little foxes. The story is called "The Tale of the Kind and Unkind Girl." Stories like that are told all around the world. You might know a story like that about a kind girl and an unkind girl. I hope you're all kind girls and kind boys and kind parents. Kind everybody. Well, our next story is from North Carolina. And it is a story called Sody Sally Rightus. And Sody Sally Rightus is a strange old-fashioned word that was used in the olden days to mean baking soda. And baking soda is what you put in your biscuits when you're making them so that they'll rise and get big and fluffy. One time, there was an old woman and an old man, and a little boy and a little girl and a pet squirrel lived in a log cabin up in the mountains. One day, the old woman wanted to bake some biscuits. So she called little boy. Little boy, go down to the store and buy me some sody, Sally, rightus, so I can make biscuits. And little boy went down the road. He was just singing, sody, 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 Sally, rightus, sody, 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 Sally, rightus. He started crossing over the bridge, went on up to the store. Sody, 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 Sally, rightus, sody, 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 Sally, rightus. Got to the store, bought the sody, Sally, rightus, put it in his pocket, and went back down. Sody, sody, sody. He got to the bridge and started crossing the bridge. There was a big old bear that lived under that bridge. The old bear stuck his head out from under the bridge. He said, "Who's that walking across my bridge?" "Just me, little boy. Me and my sody Sally rightus." "Hup," said the old bear. "Well, I'm going to eat you up. You and your sody Sally rightus too." Hup. And that old bear, he swallowed that little boy down, just like that. Well, the old lady waited, and little boy did not come home for a long time. So she called little girl. "Little girl, would you go down and see what's keeping little boy?" And little girl went skipping down the road, skipping down the road, skipping down the road, skipping down the road, skipping across the bridge. And the old bear stuck his head out from under that bridge. "Who's that skipping across my bridge?" "Just me, little girl." "Hump," said the old bear. "I just ate the little boy, him and his sody Sally rightus too. And by Jiminy's, I'm going to eat you." And he swallowed her down just like that. Well, the old lady waited, and they didn't come home. And she called, "Old man, would you go down and see what's keeping them kids? They ought to come home for now." And old man went down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road, walking down the road, walking across the bridge. You know what happened? Big old bear stuck his head out from under the bridge. "Who's that walking across my bridge?" "Just me, old man." "Huh," said the old bear. "I just ate the little girl and the little boy and that sody Sally rightus too. And by dingy dong, I'm going to eat you too." And he swallowed the old man down just like that. Well, the old lady waited, and she waited, and they didn't come home. She said, "I guess I got to go look for those people myself." She put on her bonnet, and she went down the road. She's walking down the road and walking down the road and walking down the road, and she started walking across the bridge. And the big old bear stuck his head out from under the bridge. "Who's that walking across my bridge?" "Just me, old lady." "Huh," said the old bear. "I just ate the old man and the little girl and the little boy and his sody Sally rightus too. And by Jiminy's, I'm going to eat you too." He swallowed her down just like that. Oh, well, who was left? Oh, you were listening at the beginning of the story, weren't you? Who else was in the house? The pet squirrel. He was up on the mantelpiece. He ran up and down the mantelpiece, ran up and down the mantelpiece. He said, "I gotta go see what's keeping them fool folks. They ought to come home, made my biscuits for now." He jumped down off the mantelpiece. He went skipping out the door, skipping out the door, skipping down the road, skipping down the road, skipping down the road, skipping down the road, skipping across the bridge. And the old bear stuck his head out from under that bridge. "Who's that skipping across my bridge?" "It's just me, little squirrel." "Oh, I just ate the old woman and the old man and the little girl and the little boy and his sody Sally riders too. And by crackies, I'm going to eat you up. And he jumped, but that squirrel jumped off of that bridge as fast as he could go onto a tree and climbed to the top of that tree. And old bear come out from under that bridge and he started climbing that tree after that squirrel. Little squirrel was going higher and higher. Bear was coming higher and higher. Squirrel was going higher and higher. Bear was coming higher and higher, higher and higher, clear to the very tip top of that tree. And little squirrel climbed out on a long limb. And the old bear come right after him. Little squirrel looked around and he gave a leap and landed in the next tree. The old bear said, "Huh, if he can jump it with them little legs of his, I reckon I can jump it with these big legs of mine." And the old bear drew back and he gave a leap. And what do you think happened to him? He fell right down, hit the ground, busted wide open, and pert near killed him dead, but not quite. And when he busted open, out came the old lady and the old man and the little boy and the little girl. And they were all fine because he'd swallowed them whole, you know. And the old lady said, "Where's my sody Sally Ridus?" And the little boy pulled it out and gave it to her. And she took out a needle and thread that she had, and she sewed that old bear up till he was pert near good as new. She said, "Old bear, you go away and don't you come back in these here parts no more." And the old bear got up on his legs and he said, "Huh," and he walked off, never come back no more. They went along home and she made a bunch of biscuits out of that sody Sally Ridus. They ate till they couldn't eat no more, and the pet squirrel ate the most of all. Those biscuits made out of sody Sally Ridus. And that's been a folk tale from North Carolina. Well, I have another story for you. And this story is a story called Pickin' Peas. Pickin' Peas. See, you might say picking, but then if you speak in a Southern Indiana accent like I grew up speaking, you don't say picking, you say pickin'. Pickin' peas. You can see it's retold by Margaret Reed MacDonald, that's me, and Pat Cummings made the pictures. And the little girl in the story is the niece of Pat Cummings. Pat had her come to her house and pose to make the stories. I don't know who posed for the rabbit. The story's from Alabama. It was being told by an African-American grandma back in the 1800s. And somebody heard her and wrote it down. And we got to tell it later because it's in a book, in a magazine. I found it and retold it. Now we got a picture book of it. Little girl planted a garden full of peas. Come July, the peas got ripe and ready to eat. So little girl went down the row picking her peas. She was singing, "Picking peas, put 'em in my pail. Picking peas, put 'em in my pail. Picking peas, put 'em in my pail. Picking peas, put 'em in my pail." She was picking the big peas and left the little ones to grow some more. That's what you do when you have a garden. Well, there was a pesky rabbit that come along. Remember him? He got in there behind her, and he was eating all the peas that she had left on the vine. And he was singing, "Pickin' peas, I land on my knees, pickin' peas, I land on my knees, pickin' peas, I land on my knees." He'd give a little jump, land on his knees every single time. When little girl would go down one row in the garden, Mr. Rabbit would go up the other row. "Pickin' peas, put on my pail. Pickin' peas, land on my knees. Pickin' peas, put on my pail. Pickin' peas, land on my knees." After a while, little girl got the feeling like somebody might be following her. She said, "Huh, I do believe there's someone in my garden. I do believe they're picking my peas. Was she right? Yes, she was. She said, I'm going to cut my song off and see what I hear. And she sang, picking peas, put in my pail, picking peas, put in my pail, picking peas, put in my pail. Shh. And she heard, land on my knees. Ha ha, it's that rabbit. He is in my garden. Ha ha ha. I'm going to catch him. And she tiptoed real quiet back down the row she'd already picked. Picking peas, put in my pail. He did not see her coming. He was jumping along. Picking peas, land on my knees, 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 picking peas. Whop! She grabbed him. Mr. Rabbit, what were you singing right now? I was singing, digging up roots, land on my foot. Yeah, that's it. Digging up roots. That's not what you were singing. What were you singing? And she squeezed him really hard. Mr. Rabbit, what were you singing? What were you singing? I was singing, picking peas, land on my knees. That's what I thought. You were picking my peas, weren't you? Maybe. You aren't going to pick my peas anymore. I'm going to take you home and put you in a box and keep you there till the pea picking season is over. She took him home. She put him in a box and she put the lid on tight. She ate a mess of peas. In the box, he was jumping around. Picking peas, land on my knees, picking peas, land on my knees. Hey, Rabbit, what are you doing in that box? I'm trying to sing and dance. There's no room in here. Put me on top of the box. I'll dance and entertain you. Well, I want to see that, don't you? The little girl did too. She took him out and put him on top of the box. And he began to cut up. Picking peas, land on my knees, picking peas, land on my knees. Heard my mama calling me right over there. Ha ha. And he gave a little jump. Rabbit, I like the way you sing and dance. Well, I don't have enough room on this box. If you put me on that chest by the window, I could dance better. Alrighty, she put him on the chest by the window. A picking peas, I land on my knees, a picking peas, I land on my knees. Heard my mama calling me right over there. Ha ha. And he gave a little jump. Wow, Rabbit, you are a really good dancer. I don't have enough room on this chest. If you would put me up on the windowsill by the window, I could dance really good up there. All righty. And she put him on the windowsill by the window, and he began to dance again. A pickin' peas, I land on my knees. A pickin' peas, I land on my knees. I heard my mama calling me right over there. And out the window he jumped. Ran off through her garden singing, I picked your peas, I landed on my knees, I'm going to eat all I want, 'cause you can't catch me, ha. And there he goes. I'd like to say that's the last little girl saw of that rabbit. But I have to tell you something. He was right back there the next morning. Picking her peas and landing on his knees. Picking peas, land on my knees. Picking peas, land on my knees. Picking peas. Well, I hope you like some of the stories that you heard today. You heard a story of picking peas. You heard a story of the wishing boxes and a story also of Sodi Sallyritis. So maybe you can remember one of these stories and tell it to somebody yourself and pass it on. And then you will be a storyteller too. Well, thank you from the USA, where I'm from. I live in Seattle, Washington right now, but I was born and raised in southern Indiana, where these stories have a happy home.
Thank you to our speaker for the wonderful session. Now we will continue with the 10th storytelling session entitled The Smiling Baby by Madam Alicia Dongjoo Bong from South Korea. Before we start, let me introduce our speaker. Madam Alicia Dongjoo Bong is a professional storyteller who travels around the world. She has delighted children and adults with her storytelling performance for years and recently has taken on the task of setting up International Storytelling Festival in Korea. She is the founder of Story School, which is unique storytelling school in Korea, and KISA, the Korea International Storytellers Association. She started her career as an English teacher in Korea. Originally, she focused on educating younger students. She quickly observed that her use of story presentation had a strong and immediate impact on the vocabulary on her student. After making this observation, she began using storytelling as a primary education vehicle. Over time, she developed her talents and moved into storytelling professionally. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Madam Alicia Dongjoo Bong.
Hello everyone. 안녕하세요. My name is Alicia Dongjoo Bang. I'm an international storyteller from South Korea. I'm so honored to participate in International Storytelling Festival in Malaysia. I love children. I love storytelling. Also, I love Malaysia. Today, I'm going to tell you a very special story. It is called 방긋 아기씨. My story is based on Korean picture book. 방긋 아기씨 means the smiling baby. I love this story, so I hope you enjoy listening to my story. Are you ready? Yes. Okay. Here we go. 방긋 아기씨. The author is Yoon Ji-hwae. Retold by storyteller Alicia Dongjoo Bang. A long, long time ago, in the land of the Monica, there was a beautiful queen who lived in a great palace. The palace was big and fancy, but the queen was very lonely. She always felt like she was alone because she didn't have any children. Her heart was empty. She loved children so much. Many years passed. Finally, one day, she had a beautiful baby princess. She always thought about her baby princess. She wanted to do everything for her. There are big celebrations for 10 days and 10 nights in the kingdom. But the queen recognized that something was wrong. Do you know what? The baby, the princess, never smiled. Why? Why didn't she smile? The queen had the most expensive clothes made for the princess. She even put a very beautiful flower decoration on the clothes. My baby, look at this. Look at these beautiful clothes. Don't you like them? Show me your smile. But the princess stared at the queen and never smiled. Why? Why didn't she smile? Then the queen prepared a most delicious feast for the baby. She chose the best food for the baby. My baby, try this delicious food. Don't you like them? Please, show me a smile, my baby. But the baby never smiled. Why? Why didn't she smile? Then the queen asked the most famous clown to do the funniest performance for the baby. Baby, look at this. Oh, don't you like them? Wow, look at this funniest show. Baby, please, show me a smile, please. But the baby just looked at the queen's face and she didn't smile. Why? Why didn't she smile? The most expensive clothes, the most delicious food, and funniest performances, nothing happened. The baby princess never smiled. Why? The rumor about the baby princess not smiling spread throughout the kingdom. In the kingdom there was the famous doctor. His name was Dr. Karga. The Dr. Karga heard this rumor and he visited the queen and he whispered, "Oh, my queen, I have a magical feather. It can make a crying person giggle. Please trust me. I can make the princess smile." The queen was cautious, but she was also desperate, so she decided to trust Dr. Karga. "Okay, Dr. Karga, go on then. Make my baby princess smile." Dr. Karga picked up the magic feather and then touched baby's princess' face, and he said, "Tickle, tickle, 간질, 간질, tickle, tickle, 간질, 간질." Oh no! Strangely, the baby princess started to cry and never stopped. Ah! Oh no! The queen was furious. "How dare you, Dr. Karga? You are a terrible doctor. Oh no, I will not forgive you. And God take him to prison." So she was so angry. But Dr. Karga remained calm and he did not panic. He just, "Oh, my queen, tickle, tickle, 간질, 간질." Oh no! He placed the magical feather on Queen's face and he said, "Tickle, tickle, 간질, 간질." Oh, you know what happened? So the queen started to giggle. "How dare you, Dr. Cardigan? Oh no, I can't stand it anymore. Oh no." Yes, the queen kept laughing and laughing and laughing. She almost cried. Then, you know what happened? The baby princess stared at the queen's face, the smiling queen's face. The baby princess' eyes reflected the smiling queen's face. Then the baby princess started to smile. Mommy? Queen was just so surprised. My baby, you are smiling right now? Oh, I love you, my smiling baby. Yes, the queen was just smiling. The baby princess was just smiling. You know, now the queen realized that the queen, she was smiling. It made the baby princess smile. You know, Mom and Dad, what is the most precious thing, happiness thing in the whole wide world? Is to see your children smile, right? But please remember, that's you are the reason behind that smile. Did my story make you smile? Did you enjoy listening to my story? I hope so. Please remember, always keep smiling. 하나, 둘, 셋. Smile. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
Thank you to our speaker for the wonderful session. Now we will continue with the 11th storytelling session entitled The Biggest Basket in the World and the Malay Tale of the Pig King by Madam Heidi Shamsuddin from Malaysia. Before we start, let me introduce our speaker. Madam Heidi Shamsuddin was born in Malaysia. She spent part of her childhood growing up in Seattle, Washington and Petaling Jaya, Malaysia. After leaving school, she studied law at Nottingham University, obtained a postgraduate degree in corporate law, and after taking her bar exam, eventually worked as a maritime lawyer in London law firm. In 2007, she returned home and began to write fiction. She is now an award-winning author of stories inspired by Southeast Asia for both adults and children. Her first short story, Johan the Honey Hunter, won the regional prize for the I-Level Children Literature Award in 2012. Since then, she has written and published a historical middle grade series, picture book and readers for children, and short stories for adults. In 2017, her screenplay for Batik Girl won the Intellectual Property Creator Challenge, the IPCC Award, and was made into a short animated film by R&D Studio and 2D2 Studio. Batik Girl has been steadily gaining accolades throughout 2019, receiving the honorable mention in Audien Favorite Award in Florida Animation Festival, Best Animated Short Film Prize at the Festival de Largos y Cartos de Santiago 2019 in Chile, as well as gold medal in the regional category at the 20th DigiCon 6 Asia Japan. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Madam Heidi Shamsuddin.
Hi everyone, my name is Heidi. I'm a Malaysian children's author and I'm very excited and happy to be here today to tell you two fairy tales or folk tales from my part of the world. The first fairy tale is from my country, Malaysia, and the second one is from our neighbor, Indonesia. Now, in most fairy tales and folk tales, we are quite used to seeing all sorts of magical things, such as flying fairies, wizards, and talking animals. Yes, there are a lot of talking animals in fairy tales. But have you ever heard of a talking object or a talking thing? How would you feel if a book or a chair were to suddenly move and speak to you? It'd be a bit strange, right? Stories about talking and magical objects from Malaysia are quite rare. But I've recently discovered an amazing story about a talking knife and the biggest basket in the world. This story is called The Biggest Basket in the World. And I love it because it's about how the laziest girl in the world manages to transform herself with the help of a magical talking knife. The second story I'm going to tell you is from a book which I've adapted called The Malay Tale of the Pig King. And this story not only has a talking object, it also has a talking animal, this pig here. So I'm very excited to tell you this story. The original book is called Hikayat Raja Babi, and it was written a long time ago in 1775 by a man called Yusuf Abdul Qadir from Palembang in Indonesia. I took this original book and I rewrote and readapted it as a children's picture book. So I'm going to tell you that story today as well. I'm really excited to tell you these two stories about magical talking objects and animals. So sit back and relax while you listen to my first tale, which is called The Biggest Basket in the World. Once there was a girl who was so lazy that she couldn't even be bothered to wash her face or clean her teeth or brush her hair. She never ever helped out around the house, preferring instead to daydream and to gaze up into the sky. "You really are the laziest girl in the world," said her mother as she was cooking dinner. "Why don't you stop daydreaming and help me instead?" The girl shrugged her shoulders and wandered outside into the garden. "You really are the laziest girl in the world," said her father as he was busy repairing the roof. "Why don't you help me fix the roof?" The girl smiled at her father and wandered off to the river to watch the water as it flowed across the rocks. As the days, weeks, months, and years passed by, the girl grew into a young woman, but yet she was still the laziest girl in the world and refused to help her parents around the house. Her parents, who were getting very old and were very poor, had no choice but to ask her to leave. She was becoming a burden on the family. "She will have to leave the house," said her father. "If she cannot be useful to the family, she must go," said the father. The mother, who was rather fond of the girl, reluctantly agreed. She knew that they couldn't afford to keep such a lazy daughter. The next day, the father brought the girl to the other side of the village, where he had built her a small house. "This is your new house, daughter. There's some food and water in it. We've brought your clothes and other things that you might need. You are almost an adult now, and you have to fend for yourself from now on," said the father. The girl nodded sadly. She understood. She would have preferred to stay at home with her parents, but she realized it was unfair of her to burden her parents. She was grateful that at least she had a roof over her head. "Take this," said her father. "It is a knife to protect yourself." The girl took the big knife and entered the house. And since it was already late and she had nothing to do, she crept under her blanket and went to sleep. The next morning, the girl was awoken by a loud voice coming from inside the house. "Girl, girl, wake up! It's time to get up!" She sat up and looked around, but no one was there. "Who's there? Are you a ghost?" she said in a frightened voice. "I am most certainly not a ghost," said the voice. "Now get up. You have a lot of work to do today." The girl looked around once more and realized that the voice was coming from the big knife her father had given her. "Big knife? Is that you? How is it possible that you are speaking to me?" said the girl. Get up. The sun is high up in the sky and we have many things to do. First, you must go to the river and wash yourself," ordered the big knife. Since there was nothing else to do, the girl got up and she did as she was told. She went down to the river to wash herself. And she suddenly realized that, "Oh, It feels quite nice to feel clean. Now you must clean your teeth and brush your hair, ordered Big Knife. And since the girl had nothing better to do, she cleaned her teeth and took a brush and combed her hair, and she realized, oh, it's quite nice to have clean teeth and shiny soft hair. Now you must go and wash your clothes and clean your house, ordered Big Knife. And since the girl had nothing else to do, she did as she was told. She washed all her clothes, she cleaned and scrubbed her house until it was nice and clean, and she discovered that it was nice to wear clean clothes and live in a clean house. Very good, said Big Knife. Now you must use me to cut the pandan leaves that grow by the side of the river. We are going to weave the biggest basket in the world. A basket? Said the girl. But I don't know how to weave a basket. Of course you don't know how to weave a basket, said Big Knife. You have been a lazy child all your life and have not learned anything useful. Don't worry, I will show you how to weave a basket, said Big Knife. Once again, she did as she was told. She took Big Knife, she went down to the river to get pandan leaves, and she began to cut long strips of the pandan leaves. Even though the sharp leaves hurt her fingers, the girl worked diligently. Big Knife then showed her how to use fire to clean and whiten the leaves, and after that, Big Knife taught the girl how to weave the basket. The girl worked on her basket every day. At first, she worked inside the house, but soon the basket became too big. And so she started to work outside the house, and soon the basket was even bigger than her house. What are we going to do with this enormous basket? Asked the girl. I will use this basket to find you a good husband, said Big Knife. The next day, Big Knife went to town. In town, Big Knife went to the palace to speak to the king and the prince, who was, coincidentally, at that moment, looking for a wife. I hear you are looking for a wife, said Big Knife. Yes, I am, answered the prince, but not just any wife. I'm looking for a hard-working wife. Do you know anyone? Yes, I know the perfect person, said Big Knife. Ask your servants to prepare a huge feast for your wedding banquet. Make sure they cook lots and lots of food. I will fetch your bride. The prince ordered his servants to cook up a feast for his wedding. Soon the food was ready, but there was so much food that it could not fit into any of the baskets in the palace. How will we take this food to the banquet hall? Wondered the prince. Just then, Big Knife arrived and said, do not worry, someone has woven the biggest basket in the world. The prince was surprised to see the biggest basket in the world. The person who wove this basket must be very hardworking indeed, thought the prince to himself. Tell me, Big Knife, who has made this basket? I want to marry her, said the prince. Why, it's your bride, of course, said Big Knife as he presented the girl, who was no longer the laziest girl in the world. Her dress was sparkling clean, her face and her hair shone brightly under the sun. The girl was no longer the laziest girl in the world, for she had woven the biggest basket in the world. The end. I hope you enjoyed that story. And now I will tell you my second story from my book, The Malay Tale of the Pig King. But first, I need to put on my crown because this is a story about a prince. This book also contains a magical talking knife called Si Parang Puting who can grant wishes. But it also has a magical talking animal, this pig here. Let's listen to this story. Once there was a mighty king who lived on top of a volcano in a kingdom called Rantau Panjang, Tebing Berukir. One day, the king decided that he needed a son to inherit his kingdom, and so he asked his minister to find him a wife. The minister went away and came home with 41 maidens, but instead of choosing just one wife, the king married all 41 maidens, and he had 41 wives, and that was how all the trouble began. The king thought that the more wives he had, the higher his chances of getting a son. But he was wrong. Not one of his wives could give him a child. This went on for years and years until one day, by some miracle, one of his wives announced that she was carrying his child. The king was so overjoyed that he did something a bit silly. He sent all his other 40 wives away. The 40 wives were, unsurprisingly, angry, and they came together to curse the king. They said, "May your son be born a pig, a forbidden animal." When the child was born, he did not look like a baby at all. He had long, sharp tusks, the color of ripe bananas, a curly tail which waved in the air, and the body and face of a pig. Everyone was shocked when the little pig king jumped up, bowed gracefully to his parents, and began to recite a poem. He introduced himself. He said, "My name is Raja Indra Brahmakala. As you can see, I have been cursed to be born as a pig." The pig king knew he could not stay at the palace, and so he set off into the world to find a way to break the curse. One day, the pig king met the boar king, who had an army of 1,000 boars. "How dare you come onto my land," said the boar king, and the two pigs began to fight. This huge fight woke up the fairy of Pucuk Puding, who lived nearby. She watched as the pig king defeated the entire boar army. "What an extraordinary pig," she said to herself. The fairy decided to help the pig king find a way to break the curse, and she taught him many magical things. She also gave him a magical present, a knife called Si Parang Puting. Whenever you need help, all you need to do is call out to Si Parang Puting. She is your fairy helper. So once more, the pig king set off into the world. He had to find a way to break the curse, and eventually he arrived in the kingdom of Shahrastan, Yunnan, where he met a beautiful jinn princess by the name of Tuan Putri Indra Kamala. The pig king fell in love with her, but the princess was already engaged to be married to another powerful prince. The pig king decided to challenge this prince for the princess's hand in marriage. He hoped that it would break the curse. He called out to his magical knife, Si Parang Puting, and asked her to create a golden city and a powerful army for him. That night, the pig king declared war on the prince. A huge battle took place between the pig king and the prince, where all the fairy gods and jinns from the magical world fought each other using their magic and superpowers. One fairy god flung his sword into the sky and turned it into 1,000 fiery dragons. Another fairy god threw his sword into the sky and turned it into 1,000 Garuda birds who chased away the dragons. The battle went on and shook the earth and the sky. But finally, the pig king managed to defeat the prince and win the heart of the princess. The pig king and the jinn princess were very happy, and they got married, but sadly, it wasn't enough to break the curse. The pig king did not transform into a man. Feeling sad and dejected, the pig king asked his magical knife, Si Parang Puting, to hide his golden city and his bride while he tried to find another way to break the curse. He walked on until he arrived in a country called Tebing Bunga. By then, he was so angry that all he wanted to do was go on a rampage through the city. He ran through the city, destroying houses and scaring all the people. "Run! Run! There's a vicious beast heading towards the palace." The pig king arrived at the palace and let out a thunderous roar which frightened the 7 princesses, who all fell into a faint and could not be woken up. When the king of Tebing Bunga discovered that all his daughters were ill, he pleaded with the Pig King to help him. By this time, the Pig King regretted losing his temper, and with the help of his magic knife, si Parang Puting, he made 7 cups of magic rose water to wake up the 7 princesses. The Pig King apologized to the king and the princesses for causing such trouble, and once again he set off into the world. But this time his heart was filled with joy. He called out to si Parang Puting, "Bring back my golden city and my princess." In a flash of light, the golden city appeared, and to his surprise he saw his princess running towards him. All the flowers bloomed and filled the air with their sweet scent. Up in the sky, the birds sang a beautiful melody underneath a colorful rainbow. It was then that the Pig King finally transformed into a man. The Pig King looked at his princess and he said to her, "I have been blessed by a fairy. I have proven my love and bravery to you, and I saved 7 souls. The curse has finally been broken." The Pig King took his wife's hands, and together they ruled the kingdom for many happy years. The end. I hope you enjoyed my 2 fairy tales about talking magical objects. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you to our speaker for the exciting session. Well, that wraps up our 4-day festival. Thank you very much for your participation in this program. We do hope you enjoy and able to gain as much knowledge as possible. With that, on behalf of the National Library of Malaysia, we would like to extend our sincere appreciation and gratitude to all individuals and organizations for their kind support and cooperation towards the success of this festival. And I also would like to remind to all participants, please do not forget to submit the evaluation form. I end my duty as an MC for today's event. Till we meet again, thank you. Assalamualaikum.